We learn, perhaps very haltingly, very slowly, that everything has to be in its right place. The violent among the peaceful are in the wrong place. The peaceful among the violent are in the wrong place. The violent need to be with the violent to become peaceful, or to continue in greater and greater violence and the consequences such until their whole desire is against violence. The apathetic need to be among the apathetic for so long that they long for dynamism, creativity, purpose. It almost goes without saying that you then, although things are in their right place, where they are found to be wrong, this is now a non-violent person in a violent place. There's a need to sort, to take, to rescue, to pull him out and put him in a peaceful place. Now, it may not be that you can go from one extreme to the other, although some clearly can. Maybe you simply need a place of less violence. You know, you still need to experience the suffering of violence to drive you in the right direction. We only need enough. Enough is enough, you see. Do we want the violent to really all kill each other and wipe each other out? We don't need that. We are come in peace. All they need is sufficient violence, perhaps, to realize that this is not the way, and to long in their hearts for the non-violence. But then there's a great need to select them out, to rescue them, to pull them out. We are lovers of peace. Do you see? God has not put up with me in my recognized presence with him. It doesn't mean God doesn't love me. It just means that he's putting me where I need to be to ultimately come to him. So he's put me here on the planet. I've seen violence. I've experienced a little of it and not liked it. I've even practiced it a little, and am ashamed that I have. It is wonderful that I'm ashamed, for it motivates me overwhelmingly to avoid ever being such again. I don't mean ashamed. I mean doing violence, because it should make one ashamed, and I don't want to be ashamed, of course. But I don't want to be the cause of the violence. So it's valid that I be not with the violent, because I am hating the violence in myself enough to never let it rule. Not on my patch. Do you see? sort myself out rather than be violent. I'd rather choose loneliness than to be the cause of the unhappiness and the suffering that comes from violence and destruction. I don't want to be in any way part of destruction. I am a creator. Wow. So, I had a dream last night and I was violent in the dream. And I woke to be appalled that I can be violent. Of course we can be violent. All of us could be. Why aren't we? Because we've not been pushed to the point where we're willing to be violent. We do everything in our power to avoid being the agent of violence. Okay, I'd picked violence as a particular evil. I could have picked indolence. I could have picked unfaithfulness. Any of the evils that the man in the street can easily recognize. All of us can. Laziness. You know, if you're lazy, you need to be exposed to laziness of others to appreciate the suffering, the consequence of such. And then you'll avoid such. If you're dishonest, you need to live among dishonest people. If you're a gossip, you need to live among gossips and suffer the consequence and want never to be a gossip again. If you're addicted, you need to be among the addicts, not among all the wonderful people that are not, but continue in your addiction. You're just a great burden to them, a great cost. You need to be among the addicts until you're crying out to be released. You know, Jesus says to the man at Bethesda, "Do you want to be healed?" And he can't answer him because he doesn't. And his subsequent actions when he is healed demonstrate that no, he doesn't see his condition at the pool as wanting healing. He's willing to live that way. Even though he's been there, is it 38 years? I can't remember. A long time. Do you see? He's in the right place. You would not be. For you, it's a nightmare to even go into the pool, to see the place, to know it's there. But for him, gravitates towards it. What do you do when you sort out your house? You put the rubbish in the rubbish. You put the things that are worth keeping where they should be. You put the things where they'll be of value to others, like the op shop or the dump. You put it there. You marshal your environment. Bless you. Let's explore an alternative. For instance, supposing you don't like order. Supposing you have an amazing tolerance for disorder. Well, you'll live in disorder in as far as it's available to you and suffer the consequence. Does it bring death, destruction, unacceptance, reaction from the societies you want to be in, do they throw you out, make you a pariah, ridicule you, tell you you're suffering from an addiction of, hoarding, apathy? Do they avoid you like the plague because they think it's going to bring them down in life? Do they mock you? Do they hold you in contempt? Do they not come to your rescue because, from their point of view, well, you get nowhere? I mean, I had a lady, she suffered from a hoarding addiction, we would say. Her car, she could only sit in it, nobody else. It was full of rubbish. And all of it was rubbish. Things that she'd simply never thrown away. So, a friend of mine and several others got together and cleared her car for her. At her acquiescence, I wouldn't say she screamed and longed at us to rescue her, but she agreed. Within 6 months, that completely cleared out car was the same as it was before, packed to the ceiling with junk, so that only she could sit in it again. So what do we do for such a person? Well, there's no point in keep cleaning her car. It could sap her so much of resources that, she'd fill the whole world with rubbish if we don't keep up with her propensity to do so. So we don't give her opportunity in our presence. The simplest way of not giving opportunity to be violent in your presence is to avoid the violent. The simplest way of not having dishonest and unfaithful people is to avoid them. So we start to get very good at recognizing these propensities and in finding ways of avoiding them, because you value order, creativity, an environment in which you can be loving and kind. So, it's all very sensible and reasonable, isn't it? What do you do with a person who has an addiction that overcomes all the resources you are able to put into it? You stop putting resources into it. You leave them to it. Because you're gaining nothing by not leaving them to it. You may mission into such areas, offering guidance on how to practice to come out. But you do not use up all your resources in such mission. Or you will be destroyed like they will be destroyed. Wasting your potential for life and true goodness, effective goodness and creativity. So we are here in a world largely lacking the realization of the presence of God. I say largely. There's a little goodness is missioned into, And those who value such gravitate to it fast and with great determination. They show who they are and are to be rescued, of course. How wonderful. So, yes, I do love animals, but I think possibly I shouldn't have them in my house. For my well-being is hampered by beings that cannot be civilized enough to live in this civilized way of a modern house. You may have a pet cat because cats are relatively clean. They even bury their mess in the garden rather than leave it on the surface. The dogs don't. You may have a cat that doesn't leave fluff on the furniture because you really don't want fluff on the furniture, and perhaps it brings other forms of dirt and disease in your home. You want it clean. So you might have a cat, but they live in the garden. They have somewhere warm and okay in the garage or in the shed, but not in the house, not on your bed, not on your jumper, your clothes and so on, because they are not clean. They didn't shower this morning. They've got on them whatever they picked up on them, where they love foraging, where you would not love foraging with your body. You see, you are reasonable. How is society managed? Well, at times it's thought it needed an executioner because the cost of imprisoning or keeping certain people from wrecking society was so great. Does the king do his own executions? No. He got someone who enjoys killing to do it. He's used them in a certain way. He's made the best of a bad job. He's got members of his society that like killing. He's put them in the army. He's got others that like bossing people around. He's put them in the police force. In both cases, he can control the limits to their violence and not select people for such forces that cannot be controlled, of course. They are condemned to be the victims of such deemed necessary agents of violence, the soldier and so forth. Teachers too. We need people who are going to boss the children, perhaps, if we live in a pretty tough society. So we choose teachers accordingly. You might find in a society like the modern one that you don't need such. So you choose teachers that are not violent. What do you now do with violent children? Oh, well, better get him out. He needs therapy and counselling and guidance, and if necessary, he may even need medication. But do you see, we still are saying we can't cope with certain levels of violence. They must be singled out and controlled. It's just that the means of control hopefully become more and more civilized. Societies as a whole are much more rational than individuals, and they impose on the individuals accordingly. to maintain law and order. So we find the state has the monopoly of violence. It's not that the state has the monopoly of violence and doesn't use it, but it uses it judiciously, as where it is rationally seemed necessary to do so. You may say it's very rough and ready in the way that it achieves what you would like it to achieve. That may well be true, but again it may be because that forms an environment that is appropriate for those of us who are living in it. Do you see, I'm not in heaven because I'm not fit for heaven yet. But He, a loving God, has presumably put me in a place where it's best for me to prepare and become and be transformed, made into someone who can have his freedom in heaven, because he's a blessing to the place, not a curse. Teach me, Father. May I be so teachable that you scarcely have to even show me what's wrong for me to be repelled by it. May I love you